Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So Jordan Chariton is back. He has his own channel on YouTube now. He's been growing his viewer base. Nowhere near what he had before in TYT Politics. I think he was up to like 250,000. But it's a slow start because for all intents and purposes, he was starting from 0 to 0. That being said, he is back. Now, for those of you who don't know who Jordan Chariton is, and I don't know what rock people is living under, but Jordan Chariton used to work for TYT. Roughly 4 months or so ago, he worked for TYT. In this kind of big media drama, a rape allegation is splashed across the pages of the Huffington Post. Within a day or so, that rape allegation is taken down. You have this kind of media war of sorts where all of this information is being thrown out. Some he threw out himself when he wrote his own Medium posts. Other cases, all of these people comes out the woodwork and accuse him of things, and ultimately TYT Cenk Uygur himself comes out, creates a video putting the final knife in, saying that he's firing him. Now, Cenk Uygur said a few things when he mentioned that, including working with Truth Against the Machine and essentially using money in ways that was not intended to be used, or using company money for things that they shouldn't have intended to be used. Not to mention the orgy. The orgy didn't necessarily help either. That being said, he's on his channel. He did a recent video. And I know this video is named in a weird way. It's named in a strange way. I couldn't necessarily figure out what to call it. So the video has 2 parts. Oh, I'm showing 2 parts. The first video itself, or the first section of the video, he's talking about the charges against him from TYT, essentially saying some of the things that they said wasn't necessarily true. He said they were wrong, they were false. Now the second part of the video, I don't mean to sound touchy and feely on this, but there is this aspect of the individual's humanity showing in what the person is saying. I'm calling it in this kind of colloquial way of the person's scars are showing. What I mean by that is each of us have an ascendant. So in astrology, they call it the ascendant. It's the mask that you wear to interact with the world. So it's almost like who you are, who you actually are, has a certain amount of cynical distance away from the actual exterior of you. So when you feel bad, you don't necessarily weep, weeping in public or anything else. You get in an argument with your wife or your husband or your boyfriend, you don't necessarily turn into a crying mess in that moment. Sometimes you want to be a hard ass. Sometimes you want to be something that you are typically not for a particular reason. The distance that you have from that, the person who you actually are, that feeling that you're having is who you are. The thing that you're projecting from yourself is what they consider to be your ascendant, or that's your mask. That's the thing that you wear to interact with the world. It keeps you safe in a way, in a weird psychological way. Now you can make an argument that, okay, this goes in a rabbit hole, but this idea of the ascendant itself to some degree is still this aspect of who you are. Both of those things represent who you are. The ascendant, however, is not necessarily the totality of who you are. It's not even necessarily the real emotion that you're having in the moment. It's who do I feel is necessary to address the world, and that's essentially the thing or the person or the aspect of yourself that addresses the world versus what you actually feel like. I'm making this point here that you get to see beyond the mask on this. Like, there's certain aspects of this based on what's being said and based on the way he's saying it, where it gets across a particular hit point or a particular burn point. And I would imagine it's a burn point for 2 reasons. I mean, A, he's saying that it's not true. It would be also future employment. Meaning it's a scar. It's something that actually hurts for later on. And it's something I didn't necessarily even pay attention to when it first happened. Like when all of this first happened, the splashy headline was, "Oh my God, rape." So that was the thing that people focused their attention on. Then you start hearing orgies and all this other stuff. So those were things that people focused their attention on. The lasting thing to that, though, wasn't the orgy. It was the money part. Like, that's the part I think that hurts the worst. That's the part that burns the worst. And not just from the part that burns the worst from the standpoint of just, this is not true. I don't necessarily like that this person said this about me. Not like that. But even from the standpoint of future employment and work. It stings. It leaves somewhat of a lasting mark. And I'll explain what I mean when he says it. Now, there's some things I re-listened to Cenk Uygur's video because I wanted to have a clear thing in my head on what was said in that particular video. There's some things, and I covered the story when it first came up. There's some things that I would imagine that Cenk and Jordan agree with. So let's assume for the moment that if you take a Venn diagram of the things that Jordan has said about this versus the things that Uygur has said about this, choose the things that are similar, that you can say, okay, these things match. Put those to the side for the moment and just focus on the things that they disagree with. Jordan is going to address this aspect of something that they disagree with. And I'm going to explain why this is the thing that he picked out to mention, particularly from the standpoint of the context of the statements that he's making for this video. All right. This is Jordan. Someone asks him, someone brings up, we didn't think that you were going to last at TYT. Listen to his answer. And after you hear his answer, there's another part of the video that I think gives this a little bit more context. Again, I'm always ambiguous. I'm never certain about pretty much anything. So let's take a look at it. This screen is weird. I understand. I don't know what the fuck was going on with him on this particular day. He was having technical issues. This is on his YouTube channel. But he's taking questions. So let's take a look at it. This is him. The video was named Bernie Sanders Under Attack Over Russiagate. I'll put the video down at the bottom so you can see it for yourself.
I knew Jordan wouldn't last at TYT. You know what? Let me tell you a little behind the scenes here, and I might get in trouble. So I was at TYT for 2 years. As I said in the video the other day, I really, as crappy and unfortunate as the way things ended, I am very appreciative for the opportunity I had. Regardless of how I feel now about certain people, I was given that opportunity. You could say whatever you want about TYT, but they did invest in me through the viewer to send me to Flint 9 times, to Standing Rock 7 times, to East Chicago 6 times, to North Carolina. But what's interesting now, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. When I was let go, it wasn't easy, especially when you're let go for reasons that are not entirely, or actually totally false, but that's besides the point. What's really amazing now is
all right, so that's the first part, especially when you let go for reasons that are totally false. Now, again, if you read his original pieces in the Medium, yeah, I think it's called Medium, there will be some things that overlap with the statement that Uygur made. So I don't think he's talking about everything wholeheartedly. I mean, certainly he's not repudiating his own piece. I think he's talking about something specific. And this is kind of what I get at when I say scars or aspects of those that have left a lasting mark. Not just from the standpoint of, I don't like this because I don't think this is true, or I don't like this because it's not true, but also from a business or financial standpoint. Let's take a look at it. And again, I use the term scars. You can say humanity, you can say all sorts of things, but essentially stuff that has left a lasting impression or a lasting mark. The scar seems to just work really well for it. So let's take a look.
Not 3,000 yet, but soon. And I will tell you when I'm wrong, and I will tell you if I get something wrong, because that's real journalism. But I want to end on this, folks. It's not only about your financial contributions, because I do not take it lightly if you subscribe to my Patreon. I do not take it lightly if you send support to a PayPal. I do not take it lightly if you are a small business owner and want to eventually do partnerships and sponsorships with this eventual company. I do not take it lightly if you, I've had some people literally on food stamps send me a check for $100. One woman in particular. I don't take that lightly. There's a lot of trolls out there who think they know me and think they know about me and who I am and all that. Let me tell you something. I'm not a perfect person. Was the credit card thing true? No, it was not true. For legal reasons, I cannot get into that, but no, that was not true. I've worked for 5 or 6 media companies. I literally have never, ever been approached by any company I've worked for in writing or verbally to tell me there was an issue with my spending or with anything financial. Never. And I've never, ever, I've had credit cards at several companies that were issued to me. Never, ever was I ever spoken to. So I'll leave it at that. But let me tell you something. I think that there were certain things put out there to distract you. There were certain things put out there to, let's just say, rationalize certain decisions. But you have, not only is this going to be a media revolution, this will be a transparent revolution. You will know where your money is going to. I trust Jordan with my retirement fund. Hey!
You shouldn't trust anybody with your retirement fund. Yeah, this very specific point. I think this is the thing that burns. So if you're a reporter, you're working for an organization, and I think he said in the past he's worked for MSNBC and Fox, and you just in your normal duties have some kind of expense account that company approves for your expenses. I mean, you're a reporter, you're on the beat, you're doing whatever I would imagine reporters do. It's somewhat problematic if you ever try to get another position and there's this big splashy thing that he's, you know, having orgies or whatnot, or at the very least spending money in a way that's not necessarily, let's say, on the up and up. Meaning the charges that they leveled against him from the standpoint of the way he was spending money, or the spending habits of the company, he's making a point of, yeah, that's not true. That's not what took place. Now, again, there's some things that I would imagine he would agree with, saying, yes, this is what took place. And that's why I'm saying, take those things off the table. This is something very specific, meaning a categorical denial of what they're saying I did with the expenses is not true. And you can look back over my previous work to get across this thing of, this is something that I've been relatively rock solid on. I'm not a perfect person, but by the same token, that part is not true. That is not something that I did. That doesn't just burn from the standpoint of, if he's right, meaning it's not true. That would just burn outright, meaning somebody comes out in big, bold print saying, this person did something shady with the money in regards to that we were giving him for the task or for the job. And then to compound that with other companies, meaning you're in a situation where he's trying to start some kind of media company, and he's trying to get reporters, and he's trying to get businesses, and he's trying to get all of these things to sign up, meaning people to invest their cash and their money in him, and to believe that when they give him money, that he's going to use it for good ends. And then you have this thing trailing along with you where the company that you just left in this kind of, you know, this kind of hellish exit from the company in big, bold print is kind of making this accusation that you were spending money in the way that was massively inappropriate and that you were using their resources for one of your own ventures. That's a problem. That's a problem. He has to push back on that. I mean, he has to. Like, it's almost impossible to do your own thing at the same token, dragging this particular bell around without necessarily saying anything about that particular thing. You need to address that particular charge. And I think the point of this video was to address that particular charge. And it's also categorical denial. On the other cases or the other issues, for the most part, I've never heard him directly deal with some of the charges that were made in this particular way. Meaning this seems to be the thing that he definitely nailed down, saying, I didn't do that. That's not something I did. Now, you can be cynical about it, and you can make an argument, and to be fair, just to be devil's advocate in this, you can look at it either way. Like, I don't necessarily know Jordan. I don't, you know, you can make a case that you don't really know anybody. I can't see what's in that person. I see what the person does. I see what the person says. I see their effects on the world. That's all I got. That's all any of us has. Like, I don't have psychic powers. Because I don't have psychic powers, I can't necessarily peer into the soul of the individual. I say that to say, the only thing that I have is essentially what takes place. What he does. What he says. What are the things that he's done in the past. That type of stuff. So, there's no way for me to know. At best, I can only be ambiguous with regards to what is taking place, and you lean one side or the other in the sense of who you believe. But you can say that a person would have an incentive to push back on that, even if it wasn't true. You could say that. You could say that. That's fair. But do we know that? No. And is it very possible that the person really didn't do it and they were looking for a pretext to get rid of him? That's also possible, yes. All of those things are possible. All of this stuff is, for the most part, ambiguous. There's no way to believe any of this stuff when they're throwing this stuff around. Each person is somewhat of a dog in the hunt. That being said, I can understand why you would push back against it, particularly if you didn't necessarily think it was true, or you didn't necessarily think they were giving you a fair deal with that particular point. I mean, fuck, man, they're accusing you of stealing for all intents and purposes. So a categorical denial on that point, him pushing back on that very specific point, saying, I might have did some other stuff. I was not a perfect person, but I did not do that. Yeah. And like I said, I think it's important for him to do it, because otherwise, how are you going to get a media company going? And how are you going to get people to give you cash if those people think they're listening to something that somebody else said in your other company the moment they put a knife in you in order to get rid of you? So I don't blame him. I totally understand where he's coming from. And by the way, just for a side point on this, in order to end this, I want him to do well with this. Like, if you look at TYT politics and you look back like 4 months ago when Jordan was actually there at the company, there is a massive difference. In fact, let's see. When I do these stories, I'm stuck with an obligation to try to be honest with the story. So whether I feel something one way or the other, meaning the flat fact, honest truth of it is, there is no way to know necessarily what's true. The only thing you have is, this is what this person said, this is what the other person said, whether the incentives for the people built into the situation. That's all you can do. That's all really you ever have, unless you have some kind of inside knowledge of it. Me doing this wasn't put a knife in him or not take a knife out of him, if that makes sense. I was trying to give an honest, well-rounded view of what's taken place up to this point. So let's take a look at TYT politics for the moment. When Jordan was on the show, this is when he's towards the end. So EPA removes Massachusetts from toxic lists. Chemical balloons poisons North Carolina. That's Jordan. He's in his in a nice Superman combination. And as you notice, St. Louis, I think he got arrested here in St. Louis at one point. All right, here we are. Donna Brazile, Alex Jones, Joe Manchin, pro-Medicare, election, Donald Trump. Has the Democratic Party rebounded? Do you see a drastic difference in the stories? Like, I'm trying to get the point across to you that there was a fundamental difference in the channel when Jordan was running this, or when Jordan was pushing this particular channel, as opposed to what the channel is now. And so by the time you get to the top, meaning when he's no longer affiliated with the channel, you don't get those stories from Flint or your Standing Rock or anything like that. Like, you would think that they would have had somebody at the teachers at the West Virginia thing. Not so much. Not so much. The site becomes something fundamentally different than what it was the moment that he leaves. If the argument that he's making is for something different from the standpoint of media, I want him to do well with that particular difference. Like, I may not do a huge number of stories talking about Flint or Standing Rock or stuff like that, but from the standpoint of media, from the standpoint of the public being able to do anything done, meaning for the public to even know that a problem exists, somebody has to actually identify that a problem exists. If you don't tell people that, hey, there's something wrong with your water, you guys make massive amounts of money in this country, there's something wrong with your water is not up to snuff. There are beating the shit out of Native Americans in Standing Rock. They're, you know, this particular place is on some kind of strike, or this particular place is having some kind of riot. I'm making a point that unless those things are identified and those things are brought up, nobody knows. They just go by the wayside. Everyone is blissfully unaware. Everyone goes about their affairs, and for all intents and purposes, regular mainstream media pays it no mind. And if they're not going to pay it any mind, the rest of the public doesn't know it exists. There's something fundamentally different with TYT politics when he was there versus when he wasn't there. And I'm making the point that part of that difference is this kind of identification of things that are going on within the country itself. If the type of site that he's really trying to create is this kind of a new media platform, it's almost like a like a new media platform in the way that politics goes about, and the way you get reporters all throughout the country and that type of stuff. It's ambitious, yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a good idea. I think it's a fucking awesome idea. So I want him to be magnificently successful at it. Keep your hands off the staff, but be successful. So I will leave it at that. Yeah, I like this idea. I like this idea. I like the idea a lot. So it is ambitious, but considering that, and I don't mean to hit TYT on this, I have no ill feelings towards Hugo or anybody else in that show, and this is not something I typically bring up all that often. I don't like the Russia hysteria. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I think it's magnificently dangerous. And that's supposed to be the left-leaning show. And the left-leaning show is pressuring a Republican president, pushing him to the right. You can understand that, yeah, if I'm looking for something to be somewhat of a left-leaning media organization, I would want that left-leaning media organization to not push the president to the right. I don't necessarily want us going to war. I don't necessarily want people on the platform screaming about sanctions and screaming about finding ways to escalate things with a foreign power. If he has the capacity to, I guess, gin up enough support, gin up enough whatever the idea is, you know, in order to pull it off, there needs to be something else. There needs to be something else. Because I made the point before that TYT at this point has just become MSNBC light. I will stand by that particular point. I'll stand by that point. So I will leave it at that. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks, everyone. Where is...